OOCS, Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 131, Not Exactly Hidden. There are few things as unclear and clear as interviewing a child. On one hand, they have no focus, rarely stick to the actual subject matter, and struggle to answer what should be simple questions. On the other, they have few filters and do not understand what something actually sounds like, which can be the source of a great deal of comedy or concern. Concern works too. So being inside your caretaker is a good thing? It's not weird? Observer Wu asks to get some clarity on what he was just told. Hey, why is it bad to be inside an adult? I was told it's always bad, but no one's ever told me why. The child nearest to him asks, and he pauses. Something that, as a stranger, I should not be telling you. It's something you should ask a trusted adult. Are you not to be trusted? One of them asks in a shockingly formal tone. He turns to see who it is, and it's one of the little boys. Are you being told to say it that way by someone else? He asks, and the kid nods. Of course, and it's a different kind of trust I'm talking about. The sort of thing one has with their family or caretaker. But trust is trust, right? To an extent, you can trust each other to have your back if things go wrong, but can you trust them around your favorite snacks? Observer Wu asks, and there's a pause. See? Different types of trust. An expert dodge. Do you have children of your own? Koga asks. He can't tell which one it is. But whichever one it is, it's likely not the one he thinks it is. The two are dedicated to perfecting their skills in deception and confusion, which means that everything they do has to be confusing somehow. Adults who are moved out, Wu says with a tinge of pride. Is there a reason for the question? It's not Koga behind him. It's an African man with an easy 80 pounds of pure muscle on either Koga and his bleached hair in tight cornrows. You do an excellent Koga impression, as I should. Imagar notes before reaching up to his cornrows and using them as a handle to pull up a mask to reveal that he's one of the Kogas in an Imagar outfit. There is a whistle, and Observer Wu looks up to a sea Koga there, before removing his glasses to toss to the other Koga, then pulling off his own face to reveal the location of the real Imagar. Was there a point to that? Practice mostly. Were you fooled? I'm expecting nonsense from you people, so yes and no. The masks and voices are excellent, but I expect you to do something at this point, Observer Wu says. That means that the magic worked flawlessly, Koga says, pointing down at Observer Wu's feet. Sorry, a child in the crowd says as he looks down to see a piece of paper saying, Pretend Bomb. There are all sorts of scribbles on it, and the letters have been traced in bright crayon. If everyone's looking for a ninja, no one's looking for the person that's acting normal, Observer Wu says. Exactly. The worst thing an infiltrator can do is act like they don't belong, and ninja as people perceive them belong in movies only, Koga says as he puts on his glasses. Any questions? Many, but few relate to what I'm out here for, unless you'd like to tell me what the Empress of the Epoch actually thinks of humanity. Care to ask her yourself? I have many interviews to get to, and a planetary empress likely has more on her to-do list than speak to a single person from a species that's already divided unlike her own. You think the Apuk are undivided? There are many that live away and outside the grasp of the home world, and only a fraction are criminals, Koga says, and Observer Wu narrows his eyes at him and takes in the details. It's the younger Daiki. Reasonable, but she's still the overall head of a large political bloc. She's also friendly, practical, and a master of delegation. I can ask if she has a few minutes to spare, Daiki offers. Could you? It would be invaluable to have her insight. Honestly, I'm shocked you haven't already gotten big interviews from you, short time on Centris. I have a few statements, but the schedules of the locals are so congested. There was simply no time for me in the short time I was there, and most of it was taken up surveying the Dauntless and the people inside it, getting a candid look at the training and dispatch of the Undaunted. Fair enough. Centris is a crazy world with too much going on at any point in time, Koga remarks. I'll get you an appointment, wait here. Then he's gone, and Observer Wu blinks before turning to Imagar. So has discipline and operational standards completely broken down? We're all on loose leash protocols, which is a catch-all for when things are beyond what standard military actions would take. We're basically in a beg forgiveness rather than ask permission situation. So long as we can justify things, we're basically allowed to do whatever. Just make sure you have a good reason to do anything. And acting casually when in a safe location, speaking to an ally and not under threat is a very easy thing to do. I suppose it likely doesn't help that I'm not officially within your command structure. No, it doesn't, Observer Wu, Imagar states with a grin. And while it is deeply appreciated, I have to decline further help. My duchy, while a part of Serbo, is not a dependent upon it. We must stand with our own strength or we will weigh down the whole unfairly, Hartgaran says as he walks next to the Empress. As usual, her choice of dress is simple and humble to the point. She looks more like a poor woman who had broken into the palace rather than the central figure the palace is for. The fact she's barefoot certainly adds to it. That is your own choice. Just don't be so obsessed with independence and self-sufficiency that you forget that you're part of a larger whole. Even when Guran was a nation unto itself and not a duchy, it still had trade agreements and defensive alliances with its neighbors, the Empress reminds him before smirking. Why you used to be so close to those neighbors that they called you the Four Circles, despite your own crest having a crescent, rather than a circle in its own right. And now Guran is so vulnerable that all my wives from those neighboring duchies were being asked to look for weaknesses to exploit, Hartgaran remarks. Oh, I don't know. A reputation for heads going on spikes is making quite a few back off. I'm sure it is, but that's only on the physical front where things weren't going to progress very far to begin with. The economic front is the greater concern. I have a way to help with that. My Empress, please. I must stand on my own power. Calm down, I'm not giving you anything. This one is in return for a favor. Very well. What do you need and what do you offer? I need a few princesses and a couple of sorcerers, brought to Sobenride. There are many differing duchies there looking to make their own fortunes, and very much unattached to the drama of Serbo, allowing you to circumnavigate several issues. If I request your escorting of several of my princesses and their staff to do a basic survey of the nobility, as must be done every now and again, then you will have the eye and therefore attention of potential trading partners. And what am I actually transporting that the battle princesses will be assisting? Assassins? Spies? Potentially both, and also sorcerers. Most prevalent among their numbers will be Morg Arquin. The city shaker? Yes, he has a project he'd like to see continue on Sobenraid. What form of project? Has he kidnapped another heiress? No, the Somme family is not down another daughter. Are you certain? Moderately, but from my understanding, many of the daughters have been disappearing near where Alarisom the Younger was last known to be. Permanently? Well, considering it started 2 weeks ago, it's not very long at all, and the Empress begins to explain before a slight hum cuts her off. She checks her communicator. No, not permanently. They're wandering back out with big, happy smiles. Good to see she's finding her own feet, Hartgaran says. So, Sobenride, the world where your predecessors' bones are buried. Was that a poke at me? You've been over it longer than my grandmother's grandmother has been alive. You are on record over it. I'm making small talk. And yet you felt the need to check and research whether the topic is safe to bring up. Regardless of your temperament, you are still someone that can strip everything I have worked for from me in moments and on a whim, Hartgaran remarks. It doesn't matter how humble you present yourself as. I'm surrounded by your wealth or wealth that could be yours at every moment of my life. Even if you were offering nothing, I would still be bound to go. True, it is a bit indulgent of me to feign humility when I'm the most potent of Apuk. Or it would be, if I wasn't setting the example, she replies. And hello, Koga, the Younger. Do you need something? Just wondering if you could spare a few minutes for Observer Wu from Earth? At your leisure, of course, the sorcerer states, and Hartgaran raises an eyebrow as he tries to place which one it is. He wanted to say Daiju and is still fairly certain, but the Empress has declared him to be the Younger, meaning Daiki. Not much remains for me today, but there will be some tomorrow if he's willing to wait. Honestly, I don't think he expects things to actually get so far. He's here to evaluate humanity and its impacts. Oh, don't worry. He'll get a good solid look at just what you and yours have done to change things in Serbo, even if it's not in the day-to-day life. It is going to be a big impact to show. Well, won't that be entertaining? Think you'll match whatever reaction he had to speaking to no less than 4 primals in short order? I hope so. We may not have immortals of our own, but the Apuk have a long, storied, and proud history. No immortals? Then what does the Dark Forest qualify as? A unique entity in a category all its own. The Empress replies. Fair, Koga notes. By the by, any idea what to call such a category? Not particularly my concern. I am a leader of the Apuk, not a pedantic giver of names and designations. I hand out titles and rights, not scientific notations, the Empress says. I have my own questions. Those wolves that were going to be introduced into the Dark Forest, are they the dire wolves? They're just about ready. They're pack animals, so just 1 or 2 at a time is cruel. Even with the forest being bound to them, it's better for them to have a whole pack. So you can pick apart and tame piecemeal? So we can tame all at once and have a gigantic pack of big fluffy boys. What is a dire wolf? Hartgoren asks. Imagine if the animal Lopen evolved grew to be the size of a Canador. Oh, they also tame very well and can be quite agreeable, Koga states. I see. So anyways, Sobenride? Dry, dusty, and so covered in numerous desert crops and beasts that its mineral reserves are being borderline ignored in exchange. Plenty to work with there, Hartgoren notes. In a desert, do you really think that the stunt he pulled on Lilb to Lelb will be repeatable with cacti and moss? Worked with mushrooms? Why not cacti? Koga asks. Bit on the prickly side, Hartgoren states, because there's no way for an oasis to form anywhere at all in a desert. Koga bounces back. Well, it will be an interesting thing to watch should it actually happen. Why the sudden interest in creating new dark forests on other worlds, though? They're not required for Apuk to survive. Survive, no. Behave? Possibly. What do you mean? Let's just say that on a Lilb Tulob, we found evidence of some very, very bad behavior. And there are some hints of it on Zobenried. This is the kind of bad behavior that if there was a dark forest on that world when it started, it would have shut that madness down in a hurry. But instead, it kept going. If the bright forest, as I've heard it called, was there, say, a century beforehand, how would things have changed? A lot of corpses, an enormous scandal that all Apuk worlds would still be reeling from, and humans would not have been the first non-Apuk sorcerers. Also, the Bone Chewer would have competition for most prolific and ruthless sorcerer currently alive, Koga says, and Hartgoren sucks in his teeth. Okay then. There's no way in hell I'm going to allow my wives or children anywhere near that kind of potential madness. So how do I do this? And as usual, when a question has a clear answer, merely voicing it presents the answer. When do you wish for me to leave my Empress? I have many preparations to make. 2 days, the Empress states, and Hartgoren nods. Very well, which means we'll be on Sobenride in 4. OOCS Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 132, Not Exactly Hidden. And it was terrifying, but I mean, we have a huge family home now and we all have good jobs. I mean, he's a sorcerer, one that's pissed with US. That normally means you're going to die screaming, and if you run, you die tired too. But, I don't know, things aren't adding up. Belia Barlis is a very active woman who speaks with more than just words. She speaks with her entire body and is going into borderline gymnastic routines with her explanations, which was weird as most Apuk would only gesture a little with their hands if they did so at all, and none of the other Barleys spoke in this way. Observer Wu was forced to assume that he had the good and bad fortune to be speaking to one of the more expressive family members. Good in that she's really getting the point across. Bad in that it was a lot of energy to be bringing into a conversation, and he felt like his coffee might have had too much kick to it. And unfortunately, telling the nearly hyper woman to calm down would taint the interview, leaving him with a bad data set. And how did this change your opinion on humanity? Did you have one before this? Honestly, I thought humans were a tight piece of ass, and that's all before. Really? Oh yeah, a species with a ton of men that can eat anything and are not only really enduring, but loving? Woo! She exclaims before sighing. But so far, you're like the only one on Serbo that isn't married to some really scary ladies. Really scary or a sorcerer, which is really scary by default, so I haven't gotten my piece of the pie yet. Hmm. Meat pie. Is there any left over? Ma'am, just a few more quick questions and I'll leave you alone. Oh, don't do that. I like having men around. Makes me feel more like a woman, Belia Barlis says with a hand to her chest. A pity you're heading back into cruel space when this is all over? A bit of rejuve, maybe some more flattering clothes, pair of fake horns and a tail, maybe a biograph to get them on. You'd be damn cute with some effort. Genetically modifying myself, some effort. Right. Hey, biographs are easier than gene mods. A quick surgery and they go on or off. Biographs are that easy? Yeah, but they're not too popular in the galaxy right now. Some people use them, most don't. Could one use them to, say, take on traits similar to humans? Null resistance and the like? I suppose, but, well, human women don't look too good. What do you mean? When you have parts of another race grafted on, then you look like them, right? Right, that sounds reasonable. Well, think about it. Human women don't have axiom to keep them looking good, nad healthy. I've seen a few images of unmodified human women. They don't have any real bounce and their hair looks dead, and they need makeup to look like there's any life in them. I mean, really, with women like that, it's a shock that humans actually survived as a species long enough to make it out of cruel space. Right, and is this a common sentiment? He asked slowly. You're looking for all points of view? Well, this is the locker room gossip. Human women are the luckiest ugly bitches in the galaxy. You do realize that without the smaller breasts and rears, that human women would live a life of suffering and agony within cruel space, I hope. No pain, no gain. Or rather, plenty of pain and no gain. Earth is not kind to people that ignore physics and basic cause and effect. Observer Wu remarks. Well, the pictures of the few girls from out of your patch of the galaxy really doesn't flatter them. If they're not plain, ugly, or sick-looking, then they look like the most pissed off or unimpressed people imaginable. So if they're not too ugly to screw, then the main issue would be finding one that isn't too frigid to have fun with, Belia Barlis says with a big grin on her face. Well, this interview is going to piss off more than a few people. Happy to help, human, she says with a cheeky smile. I'll bet everyone's all gushing and glowing about how great humans have been. But me, I'm going to have some fun with it. I mean, really, how much does Earth have to be full of raging bitches that men are literally running a galaxy away to get some distance before relaxing? And how did you come to that conclusion? How did I come to that conclusion? I'll tell you how I came to that conclusion. Basic logic. How is it that your species fielded an entire army of unattached men? Unless your species has a disgusting mortality rate, then the even gender split should mean that logically no one should be unattached. Everyone should have someone. But no, we have armies of young men at their most handsome, energetic, and capable alone, with no one. And girls have been noticing. Most think of it as their lost situation, but we've been noticing. The bloody prophet may be scary, but a man that knows what he loves in life and is so ready to love and be in love should have had someone long before he became who he is today. To say nothing of every other soldier, or your admiral. I mean, really? One of the most famous, rich, and well-to-do men on an entire world gets screwed over by his only wife? What are you doing on Earth? Things are a bit more complicated than that. Oh, sure, the things that lead up to something can be complicated, but the idea of an entire world of men is not only out there, but they're showing signs of outright abuse as well. Bad sign. Very bad sign. It's not abuse, it's more complicated. I'm sure there are 1,000 reasons for every 1,000 reasons for everything I've listed. But you're asking about what I think, not what I know. I think I see a lot of badly abused men. What I know is that things are more complicated, but complicated doesn't mean things look any better. You want an opinion? Here's a low-down, right at the ground level opinion. If not for the null, there would be a rescue operation to get human men away from human women. You must be joking. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. But the question is it a possibility Earth can ignore? Beliobarlis asked with a smirk. So there's a negative public opinion on the women of Earth? Oh yes, and I'm going to be paying attention after this. After all, seeing how those girls flail around in response to this kind of thing is going to be fun. Is this some kind of round about revenge on Vernon? Only kinda. It's also true, which means I can just dodge behind that. Apparently he respects honesty. Beliobarlis says before shrugging more with her left side than her right, but still shrugging her whole body. Somehow, the woman is damn expressive. And you get revenge. I'd want more if the last call from my nieces and nephews wasn't about all the cool things they were doing, or how battle princesses were showing them how to fight and even helping with schoolwork. Apparently, they're all at least a year ahead of where her public education would bring them, and you have very mixed feelings about things. Of course I do. I want the best for the little fire starters, but I want them here. Every morning where we don't trip over them or get in a fight over the fried meat strips is a bad one. But they're doing better there. Even with the fucking Harcool, they're doing better. She explains as she goes still and just stares into the distance. Her look halfway between rage and sorrow. Then she sighs heavily enough that sparks fly out and seems to reinflate herself. How about a slight change of topic? You've made your thoughts on what humans on Earth are like clear, and what humans on Serbo and even Centris are like. But have you heard of other batches of humans and what they've been up to? Oh, I did hear that a group of them tamed a bunch of pirates and took over some world right on the edge of wild space. They're like dukes and barons and all sorts of things now. Ah, yes, those guys. So you know who I'm talking about? I do. I've spoken with them a bit. But this isn't about what I know, it's about what you know. So what have you heard about them? Well, Soben Ride. Not the furthest or most exotic apocolony world, but definitely one that most tourists and such avoid. A trip there beyond standard trade grabs attention. Haley Garan notes from where she's comfortably lounging next to her husband. She was in a state that most would call fabulously disheveled. Most girls had to work to look this good when they pried themselves off the furniture, but being well-heeled and well-fucked helped so very, very much. Clearing the air between yourself and your family before coming together in wholesome and carnal with the husband and sister wives ways really took all the stress off a woman. Made her easily look her best. Happy and healthy is attractive. Imagine that. Yes, apparently the Empress detects trouble and wants to put the planet on notice. In her own way, Hart Garan answers. Oh? How's she going to do that? Get into all the trade contracts so that she can nullify them and starve the planet of vital resources? Put a battle princess in each guard force and precinct house as reinforcements that are also blatant spies and threats? Vanth Goran asks. Maybe, but her opening move is to take a peek in while Morgarkin tries to grow another extension of the Dark Forest like he did on Lilb Tulelb. And she's going to use me as transport. It's the repayment for her recent help and also putting me in the hot seat as her clear patsy, which is both reward as people will want to make trade deals with Garan as a whole if I'm in good with her, and bad as those who move against her, even subconsciously will slot me into the enemy category. Could you repeat what you just said after the fact that there's apparently a second Dark Forest on Lilb Tulub, and that a third is going to be grown on Soben Raid? Garan asked in shock. Don't worry about it. What else is happening is entirely secondary to the fact that the Dark Forest is reproducing. So are we going to get another unnaturally dark forest of lush trees, bushes, and vines growing on Soben Ride? Where will get the water? Or the fertile soil, for that matter? Yirigurin presses in shock. The bright forest on Lilb Tulelb is apparently a mushroom forest, Hartgurin says, and there's a pause. Really? A phosphorescent mushroom forest at that, so it glows in the dark and is under a rainstorm that lasts half a year at least. Oh, that's odd. Wait, is the next one going to be like, I don't know, a giant forest of cacti whose spines can spear spaceships? Will it be a seaweed forest on a watery world? A coral one? Will it be in the crops of a farming world? The drugs of a world famous for them? The hell kind of nightmare would it be if it starts reproducing on worlds that are already covered in insanely dangerous plants and animals? Well, seeing as how it can reason with and has a long history of adopting young boys in need, well, I'm not seeing much of a downside. You're a boy. Of course you're not. The Dark Forest, by its past actions, wants to be unharmed and wants its sons, who are extensions of itself, to also be unharmed. The only thing that's unreasonable about it is the fact that it will take retroactive offense and injury if it adopts a new son, and it uses lethal force nearly every single time. Beyond that, it's perfectly capable of being reasoned with, up to and including being given citizenship status, which, the clever witch. Clever witch, what do you, wait, she's setting a precedent up. A legal precedent that means she can effectively land grab on a galactic scale with the Dark Forest help, or rather, with the help of the Dark Forest species. If the first of the species is a Serbo-citizen, then so are all its children and their children's children's children. By inheritance laws, any place a new Dark Forest sprouts would count as further Serbo territory, since the terrain is now a citizen, with legally recognized precedent, Hala Garan says as her eyes widen before she goes cross-eyed and shakes her head. Why and how is it that every single time I look at her plans, I find more and more and more moves in advance? Because the Empress is scary, good at what she does, and the only reason she's not a primal is likely because the attention it would bring to her would make her less effective, Yarigaran notes. You know, I can actually see her saying that being a goddess would be too much more to do on top of being Empress, or it's somehow not being fair to the competition, or that it would discourage her potential rivals from revealing themselves, and goddess knows how many other things. Heart Garan moans, then pauses and chuckles. OOCS Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 133, Not Exactly Hidden. Thank you very much for this meeting. I understand that as such a politically powerful individual, you have a great many pulls upon your time and attention. Observer Wu says to the Empress, and she nods ever so slightly. Less so than many would think. One of the biggest keys to successful leadership is delegation. I have the most uptight and pedantic women on my worlds, going over laws and smaller details. Their instructions are to keep the legal code lean, mean, and clear. A small army of secretaries with a representative that answers directly to me, and all of a sudden I have plenty of time in my day. And the system works well? I have high standards and offer equally high pay and benefits to those that meet them. Every girl knows for a fact that thousands upon thousands want their jobs and are scouring through their actions to try and find an excuse to get them fired. After I made a few examples of those trying to frame others, bear false witness and sabotage the women whose jobs they wanted, the system smoothed itself out wonderfully. Sounds prone to backfire. In a setting where leaders come and go, it does backfire and backfire badly. But with a strong and consistent hand on the controls, it can be made to work, the Empress explains. Still, we do have a nice and official appointment. This way, please. She leads him down the hallways and past her normal office. We'll be having a walking interview. There's a few art pieces that you'll likely find quite interesting. Art pieces? Observer Wu asks. Yes, during what you humans would call a Bronze Age, Weapuk discovered how to use preserving axiom markings on expensive art pieces and equipment. It was a mainstay in society since and of enormous use at keeping much of our history alive. Then the hallway she leads him into is dominated by numerous tapestries and objects of varying types on pedestals and sealed behind glass. It's my belief that a society and people can say whatever they want about themselves. They can present themselves any way they choose to. But in the end, the truth of a people is in the actions they have taken time after time after time. It's my hope that by showing you this gallery that you'll reach an understanding at who and what the Apuk are. I have read many pieces of art from you humans and I like what I've seen, but the question is, will humanity back on Earth like what they see in us Apuk? Many peoples cannot stand those like themselves for the very reason that they are like themselves after all. You believe our races have much in common? Observer Wu asks as she indicates the first tapestry on the left. Well, barring the proclivity for horns and tails, tell me that such an art piece would not belong on Earth, she says, and he examines the almost folk art style tapestry. It shows scenes of horned women hurling spears at one another, of great fire and battle, of it ending and being decided by a great hunt where one brought a mountain of prizes and the other a prize the size of a mountain, before descending down to show the two champions wrestling with one another, ending with one holding the horn of the other high above her head in triumph as the other kneels and clutches her head. It's certainly a remarkable piece. It's also the oldest here that isn't badly damaged or in pieces. It's so old we were able to determine that the primary tool for sewing it together was a bone needle. This came from a tribe that was just barely learning how to forge the crudest bronze and to whom copper tools were a sign of wealth. You can find their descendant all over their ancient lands in the southeastern portions of Serbo's landmass. Remarkable. But what does it mean? It details two great champions said to be goddesses who walked among mortals. Zeta Shakalvar in her feud with Matharatokkalvar, or roughly translated from the oldest of Cinder tongue, Zeta one huntress and Mathara all huntress, the goddess who could fell anything, no matter how great it was, and twin sister who could hunt entire forests at once. And the one huntress triumphed? She also lost. There was once another two tapestries that followed this one. They are destroyed in ancient civil wars, but we have their descriptions and a few crude recreations. But according to the legend, Zayata proved herself the greater at hunting any one thing, but when seasons turned and starvation followed, her sure kill method was too slow to feed her people. And her sister Mathara, shamed but still a mighty huntress, was the one to provide for her tribe, leading to the tribe of the weaker, humbled people to triumph over the proud but foolish tribe. Is this legend or historical record? We don't know anymore. The figures of Zayata and Mathara are a part of many foundational myths to Apuk peoples. However, a full fourth of my species can trace their lineage back to this tribe. Can you? No, but it has a place of honor in my collection for the sheer impact it has. And what does it teach your people? That resilience and many smaller victories can eclipse a larger one, that being humbled and bested is not the end, and to focus only upon the largest victories and your own pride is a swift path to death, the Empress says before smiling. However, the fact the other two tapestries are lost also tells an important story, that like all people, we Apuks sometimes learn the wrong lessons from the past or make improper assumptions. To see this tapestry alone, one would think it a simple tale of how one tribe and its greatest huntress bested another. Interesting. Very interesting. How did you learn the rest of the story? Beyond basic descriptions of the other tapestries? Frauds exist in all ages and times. Forgery is a popular thing for them to do. There are derivatives made at later dates. Some of those derivatives even have the complete set, the Empress says. Still, there is a difference between possible history that's been made into myth and myths that tell a broad history. Such as the one directly behind me? Correct, it's actually one of the newer pieces detailing one of the oldest origin myths of the Apuk. This hall starts from the left at the oldest and the newer at the right. Near the end, there's only a few documented weeks difference in age between the artifacts. And they're all here, in a part of my palace where public tours are always allowed into. My home is many things: a statement of power, a fortress, a cultural icon, a museum, and of course, a home, she says as they both slowly turn to behold the massive tapestry behind them. This one was a donation from a recreation society. No such tapestry such as this survived from the olden days, but this is as close a recreation as one can make without time travel. Is there a reason nothing survived from this time? It was a very war-strewn time and many things were set on fire, the Empress says as Observer Wu examines it, taking out the communicator recording things to ensure it misses no part of the tapestry. It details the earliest origin myth. Look there, you can see the ancient cinder turtles hunting with the sparks on their breath to scare prey into the waiting jaws of their fellows. And it leads into a figure cast as a collection of stars taking the shells and giving light to the turtles, trading their shells for wisdom the light of the gods. The Empress says, and it shows a great number of turtles give up their shell and reveal women beneath the armor. It shows many of them walking in different directions in the center of the tapestry, with the bottom of it taken up entirely by the images of vines, with warriors being strangled, their spears snapped, and figures that can only be epic sorcerers standing tall among beasts and the boughs of trees. Have sorcerers in the dark forest been a plague for your people from the beginning? Oh yes, but always terrifying, real and tangible. The dark forest and its sorcerers would be the greatest historians on Serbo if they had the will for it. A few do serve in that capacity. It's how we've been able to recover and restore some artifacts, to say nothing of translating lost dialects predating when any form of Cinder tongue held prevalence over Apuk kind. So how important are they? Observer Wu asks. I've had many interviews that extol their power and how desired they are. But how have they shaped the history of your people? Well, that is... The Empress begins before the door opens, and the Empress is there. Observer Wu turns in time to see the body double reveal herself to be a cloaken woman who bows and immediately leaves. My apologies for the deception, but several of my duchesses decided they couldn't wait to speak with me, and it's not normally worth the drama to refuse. Drama? We're a very martial species, good observer. As you can see in many of our historical pieces here, combat, hunting, and competition are a big part of Apuk culture. More combat than hunting, but always in competition as the first part of the Tale of the Sisters details. The Empress says, gesturing to the first tapestry, My Empress, shall I entertain your more ranking guests now that you've divested yourself from them? By all means, Adora. All the official portions are finished with, and it's just keeping the overgrown children out of trouble. The Empress says with a smile, and the cloaken Adora smiles before her. Form shimmers, and she is the Empress once more. Finding a loyal cloaken skilled enough in their natural arts that it takes adepts to spot the difference is well worth the trouble. My own princesses struggle at times to tell us apart. I'll wager the battle prowess is the deciding factor. Yes, but only in regards to the warfire. She can only get up to green herself. She can what? Observer Wu asks, is warfire not an Apuk exclusive technique? Too hot to use for other races? Only a few being able to resist it even slightly with cloak and knot on that list. She's more or less a hidden princess and paid lavishly for her services, the Empress says. Must be useful. Is what she told me applicable? It is. I have an earpiece. I was listening to you the whole time. Consider everything she said as if I said it. You more or less did, Observer Wu states, and the Empress smiles. I did, didn't I? Now then you wanted to know more about sorcerers, yes? Well, our first example is on the right side, as you can see, but the oldest is on the left 2 pieces down. Before this piece, almost all known sorcerers simply showed up, took their vengeance, and vanished. This is the first one that was tamed in any capacity. How did that happen? Observer Wu asks. Purest accident. The war lady whom had done him harm had bitten off more than they could handle and died. So when the sorcerer began their hunt, they found only the mass grave the body of their tormentors had been thrown into. Here we are. Observe the patches sewn into this tapestry. The story had to be revised as more was learned. You can see there near the top left where a tiny figure runs towards a massive green that represents the dark forest, the Empress says, which leads to this next part here. The triumphant war lady had actually passed her dominion to her heiress by this point, and her granddaughter was the one who noticed that there was an extra person, a man no less, among the serving staff. That this person was oddly quiet, observant, and seemingly standing in judgment over the family. What happened when he was confronted? It does not say upon the tapestry, only that he was spoken to. She says, indicating a figure who was painted in green and trailing a path of green, speaking to an Apuk in a formal regalia. The record is lost until the palace is attacked through its weakest wall next to the serving quarters. The wall promptly grew into the strongest as it rose up as a mountain covered in dark foliage. He follows her finger as she highlights the history of her people, and then, which leads to one of the princesses claiming him as hers. The first sorcerer openly taken as a husband. It was thought before that they simply returned to the forest, vengeful ghosts who lived out what lives they had beneath the dangerous leaves. But he taught us differently. Epic warfare changed when we learned just how many sorcerer stories were real and just what they truly were. How old is this piece? Many thousands of years. This was taken from the western parts of Serbo. They have some of the longest coherent history in our society, but it's old even for them and spread out quickly. From what I understand, this would be the equivalent of ancient China for a human. The revelations of this causing a massive warring states period that ended with the consolidation of those Apuk into a regional identity, one that is now part of the greater Apuk whole. The empire that formed from them was challenged, broken apart, and reforged many times. It currently sits as a collection of 20 sister duchies. The great many they are called, each of them incorporating a dark green paint in each corner of their crest. And this relates to humanity because it's happening again, but with the aid of humans. When I saw Mr. Shea grow that tree in the arena, I was shocked, but excited. He has proven himself the first of many, of a way to bring this ancient force that has touched the history of my people from its inception into our ranks. Perhaps not an epoch itself, but one with us, joined with us as a whole, rather than taking our sons and making them part of its whole. I will do as no other ruler before me has. I will have authority, true and recognized, over the dark forest, the primal power that has helped shape us. You don't lack for ambition. Of course not. As the first Cinder Turtles did, I reach for the stars, casting aside petty vanities to stand taller and see clearer than all before me. I learned from my ancestors, Observer Wu. They have great stories and incredible wisdom to share. And the first wise things they did was seek wisdom, something I know you humans have in common with us. Christians say in Apple, mystics claim angels came down to breed with us and impart divinity, the hoarded wisdom of the spider escaping, lessons from great dragons. Yes, the earliest stories are all about humanity growing wise. Now I have little time left, but I have some food for thought. And that would be? All origin stories agree that their people were given wisdom. Who is this giver of gifts? The divine normally. Observer Wu answers the supposed brain teaser in an instant. Which one? The Empress asks with a smile. There has to be one, he answers, and she nods. Which is the proper question, isn't it? Well, it certainly has fascinating implications whether you answer it in the positive or negative, doesn't it? He asks her. It does. Now feel free to spend time in my home. I must attend to something. Unless a guard bars your war, consider yourself welcome wherever you chose to go. OOCS, Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 134. Not exactly hidden. Do I know you? Is a question no one expects when entering their own spaceship, but asked it is of Hart Garan, and not unreasonably. He is after all transporting numerous battle princesses and at least one sorcerer. But still they should know his face if nothing else. So he regards the man who asked. It takes him a moment to place it before the title emerges. His guest of honor, the city shaker Morgarkun, a man effectively immune to warfire and capable of taking complete control of the area around him. In other words, a sorcerer. Is everyone moved in and comfortable? The trip isn't long, but I do have a question. One of the battle princesses begins. Yes? Why does your starship have a quintuple size and strength sensor array? Try to recall my recent family history and rethink your question, he replies. Wouldn't ablative plating and redundant systems be more the thing for dealing with mines? We have those too, but the best way to avoid being damaged is not to be hit by any attack. My ship can and will sense any incoming danger, and the sensor array can be retooled to operate as a communication array, second only to the pylons of the galaxy that keep our massive mess of an oversized civilization functional, Hart Garan says. All it's missing is a massively overcomplicated array made up of protein. I see, and armor and such. This is not a warship. This is a yacht. Morgarkun merely regards him for a while longer. The weapons are hidden, and the redundant, hyper-powerful shields are also in standby in case someone's stupid enough to attack. There we go. Even public transport is armed and armored, Morgarken notes, not more than required to deal with stray asteroids or aggressive void fauna. Incidentally, that reminds me of something, he says, quickly pulling out his communicator and texting his quartermaster to get someone to double-check the nets to make sure they're secure. Engine nuzzlers always leave a huge mess if you give them half a chance. The response he gets back that she herself had just finished that during the pre-flight checkup makes him nod. What was that? I don't like landing on a planet and seeing the charcoal that was engine nuzzlers drift out of my ship. I wouldn't think the cleaning costs would be much, Morgarken comments. They're not, I just don't like the idea of my engines getting dirtied to begin with. Hart-Garan replies before thinking. I'm certain I was told something about you by one of the sorcerers. Something about, damnation, it's going to bother me all trip. One of them, Vernon, taught me one of his tricks for being a transmutation adept on top of being a sorcerer. Ah, yes, that's it. Care to share what that is? Easy enough. Have a cheat sheet, Morgarken says, and at Hart-Garan's confused look, he withdraws a small case and it expands in his hand. It has tiny samples of numerous metals, chemicals, and alloys of all sorts. Basically, I have a copy of what things look like on the atomic and molecular scale, so I only have to worry about things going up. Makes it much easier and shaves years and years off the training and study to be a transmutation adept. Interesting. No, the interesting bit is that it's apparently a trick all of them use, and a few of them are pissy that Vernon's giving away secrets like that, but can't do a thing because they were not official secrets in any capacity. Morgarken says, remembering the silly argument he got into a month or so back. I see. What's the funniest thing you've done with it? Some dimwit was trying to get a bribe off me, so I literally conjured an Axiom Ride coin, slapped them with it, and threw it away like a toy. They were so stunned they didn't even think of chasing it down to get it, as I walked away and then reported them for corruption. Morgarken states, even with everyone being inspected for things, the corrupt and stupid will still try something. Dangerous idiots walking off cliffs is what many define as a self-solving problem. Hart-Garan says before his communicator goes off, Sir, final checks are all clear. We are free to fly. Then let's get going. The sooner we leave, the sooner I get home to my family and duchy. Hart-Garan replies, Standing by. Ship takeoff in 10, 9, 8. The captain begins counting down and Hart-Garan nods. Is there any last-second concerns? The term is very literal now. Hart-Garan asks his passengers and then nods after no one says anything, and the ship lurches ever so slightly. All right then, time to fly. So, many nobles have larger. The main one was destroyed along with nearly my entire bloodline when I was a child. Care to keep asking? Hart-Garan interrupts the battle princess. And what will you do if I do? She asks, and he narrows his eyes. Keep pressing and we will see. Hart-Garan answers. And I'm saying enough and getting into the middle of this. There will be no fire-spewing contests. You girls are on a mission from the Empress, and I have something I'd like to do. Let's not get ourselves thrown off the good Duke's personal ship before we've even broken orbit. Oh, relax. I'm just playing with the prickly little guy. Despite your horns reaching upwards and my own cresting forward, I am still taller than you, Hart-Garan states. See? So prickly. Reminds me of my cousin. So full of pride. Struggles so hard to relax. Ma'am, I have work to do. This is a strictly business venture for me, where I also repay the Empress. In a manner that I also end up in a different kind of unspoken debt because it's impossible to get out of that woman's grip when she grabs on. Yes, it is. And the worst part is that you learn to like being there. Morgarken admits with a huff. How'd she get you? Rescued my family from destitution and cleared away all the legal nonsense that corporate interests were burying them alive with. Morgarken states, and Hart-Garan tries thinking on it. Not everyone is born into health, my lord. My family is the proud owner of a corner store. That's it. Surely you have more than that. Some of us do, and don't call me Shirley. That was awful. I've been watching some human media, and am happy to let them take the blame. Morgarken states, and Hart-Garan scoffs. Excuse me, my duke, but I arrived late. Where are the kitchens? One of the princesses asks, and Hart-Garan draws himself up. This way, it wouldn't do for me to be a poor host after all. Hart-Garan says with a slight nod as he begins to lead away the princess in shimmering yellow. Make yourselves comfortable, my guests. The intent of this travel period is to be as boring as possible. I need to go over the business arrangement and potential export agreements. And I need to entertain myself. The hybrids in my quarters are doing well. The ship is on its way, and I got a bunch of those movies to still go through, Morgarkin says before shrugging and moving through the ship. Time for another lazy bit of travel. Soben ride is as warm as Serbo, but the taste and smell of the air is very, very different. Drier to start with and nothing green in it. Morgarkin is walking oddly past Hart-Garan and turns to him. Thank you, Morgarkin says with a strange intonation. There is... The vines under his clothing are writhing and growing up and around in tiny filaments around the man's horns. Excuse us. He walks to the nearest jump pad, and then there is an impact sound and a wave of dust before he's simply gone into the distance. That was not Morgarkin that jumped, Hart-Garan notes as the speck that Morg had been reduced to vanishes over the horizon line. Do you have any idea how entwined sorcerers are with the dark forest? Because that was not an Apuk who moved, one of the princesses asks. You'd know better than I. There is still so much we don't know. It makes so little sense. How are they just so connected to the forest? How does it do that, the princess asks. That's what makes them sorcerers. They defy our understanding. Even when they fully explain themselves, there is so much that is unsaid, or simply cannot be said, that we still do not understand, Hart-Garan says. Now if you'll excuse me, I have an appointment to get to, and I believe you do as well. Yes, the 5 queens of Soben Ride will be having us in their courts as they oversee their duchesses and their duchesses oversee their baronesses. And as all that happens, a sorcerer moves in a historical manner. We have a limit of time before everyone starts to panic. The first plant he encounters isn't a cactus. It's a scraggly bush with small pale yellow flowers halfway into opening. At his conjoined touch with the dark forest, it is, for now, part of the greater whole. This plant does not have access to some deeper source of water. The dark forest twists the air itself into humidity, and its leaves are wet. Small drops of water slide down the trunk of the scrub and nourish the roots. What do you think? He asks his conjoined self. Let us see more. His other self remarks as the wetting of the plant produces a rich, earthy scent. It is homey and calming, but if they are to see, it is best to see more. The mushrooms on Lilb Tulelb, the bright forest. That was lucky, but to rely on luck is to follow whatever plan it may have, and not all plans are good. Morgarkin, more than the forest, pulls out his communicator and looks over a general map of the world. Nothing complicated, just basic terrain readout. Scrubland, arid dry land. Some rivers and many sandy deserts and rocky areas. They are in scrubland. At the extreme poles are colder places, Arctic deserts. Just as dry, the rivers are rare and valuable. Should they be protected and made to live? It should. They move as one and are headed at speed to the nearest river. It is 600 kilometers away. It is always a pleasure to make the acquaintance of the nobility of the homeworld. Please, Lord Guren, join me for a drink. I had been so saddened when I heard of the travesty that had visited itself upon your family. The Duchess of Zalitha says, and Hart-Garan nods. She's opulently dressed, but following the old traditions in being humble. Like the Psalms, Zalitha is wealthy on a scale that less developed worlds struggle to compete with. Her gown is humble by the standards of her wealth, but could feed a clan of hundreds for a year. Something that Garan has forced himself to learn more about in order to get the clearest look at his people, so as best to rule them. Yes, for them all to be slaughtered, and not in honorable battle or daring treachery, but in a simple stupid trap set by simple and stupid minds. It will be many generations until the Garan fly on anything but the most censor-heavy ships, if we ever do so again. This lesson feels like one that is hard, if not impossible, to unlearn. Hart-Garan notes as he takes the offered drink from the serving man. His own outfit is reminiscent to older military uniforms, It allows movement but has the appropriate regalia, and compared to Duchess Zalitha, he looks and feels like a peasant. So in some ways he's more appropriately humble, but also failing in his humility, but also succeeding. He's not here to impress her, woo her, or intimidate her. He's here for business. Minds and civilized systems. What is the galaxy coming to? Duchess Zalitha demands in a fury. Blessedly, it seems to be moving in other directions. Has it? How strange. The galaxy rarely moves so swiftly, Duchess Zalitha says, swishing around her drink and taking a sip. It's a dark orange mixture with a thick viscosity. Blood is a major component of it. Yet it has decided to. Thankfully, those pirates in question will be bothering none and no one ever again. I heard about that. I was shocked to hear that so young a boy would do something like that. The actions of a hardened campaigner from an adorable child. She simpers with her gloved hand caressing his cheek. Such a serious young man you are. Even now, you're here for business and not to see what other worlds the output call home. You're here to make things stronger and not find some way to lessen the pain. Duchess Zalitha. Now, don't interrupt a lady of high standing like that. It's rude. Apologies, but you left a substantial gap in the conversation to fill. I suppose, she says. So what is happening? Pardon? Oh, don't be coy, young man. You arrived with battle princesses. You arrived with the city shaker. What is going on? What is going on is that our dear Empress is in motion. I'm merely caught up in her machinations, as repayment for her recent aid. And why did she aid you? An ancient family such as mine being exterminated and devoured might remind the duchies, baronies, and the like that their ancestors won their seats with blood and war. The Empress finds that unacceptable, Hart Guran says as he swirls his drink and takes a sip. It is heady, hearty, and somewhat sour. OOCS Into a Wider Galaxy, Part 135. Weight of Dynasty. So they're really trying such a stunt with you? I hadn't realized that the duchies and baronies of the homeworld were so opportunistic. We're all at the feet of the Empire's throne. Many people can't see any of the details for the shadow that casts upon us all. For all that they're eager to stand out, they seem to be lacking skills in basic pattern recognition. Hart Guran says somewhat disdainfully. I can imagine so. Whereas your own is so finely tuned that you have brought only yourself and not the remainder of your family when coming to visit. I'd be offended if I didn't know that you were terrified of further minds. Duchess Zalitha teases him. It's not a rational fear, but so few fears are rational beasts. He replies simply. This seems to leave her mildly lost for words. Admitting a weakness is not something normally done. But like during a fight, sometimes you have to give ground. It puts people off balance. I suppose that nearly all traditions are born oddly. One where your family keeps itself safe might be interesting to watch, presuming your lineage lasts long enough. Presuming indeed, Hart Guran notes. So you truly don't know what the city shaker is doing? Last report, and the man was racing through the Badlands to the dunes to the few rivers dotting this lovely world. I have nothing confirmed as to what he's doing. I don't know for certain. Success and failure are always both options. Meaning you know what he's attempting. I'm fairly certain. Fascinating, she says, taking a sip of her drink. Hart Guran does the same with his own to cover up a smile. On to other topics. From my understanding, you've taken it upon yourself to adopt distant relations that have been lost, like yourself. I have. Poor children have so much upended. But with all the work I must do, I can't be the most attentive of parents. Unlike those we rule over, we of the command class must dedicate ourselves entirely to our duties and simply don't have enough time to raise our children. No doubt it's been a terrible adjustment for them to go from a loving and caring home to one based on duty. Are they coping well? Thriving from my understanding. Their grades are high, their health is nigh flawless, and they want for nothing. But I do not doubt that there is a loneliness within them. The lives of the lower class are warmer for all that they are poor, Hart Guran says. Not so skilled at delegation as others, I see. I tried to be, but there were so many alterations and movements. I know now that they were the moves of rivals, but when I was younger, I wasn't looking far or wide enough to see what going on. Ah, yes, the simple bribe of a better-paying job. It cost you many employees, didn't it? I leaked them like a sieve and was too naive to use a proper non-compete clause. I had overheard some people complaining about them on forums and the like before I was in power and thought it a cruel thing to do, not realizing its protection, and many of those under them are effectively complaining about wearing safety equipment. Thankfully, you learned your lesson before it was too late. Did I, though? I suppose such a thing is easy enough to say, but it feels like a thorough failure regardless. You were a child then, and by many respects are still a child now. There is no shame in failing to measure up against those who have not only been practicing longer than you've been alive, nor is there shame in flailing and making mistakes when you are suddenly thrust into a situation where you never expected to be, were expected to be, or prepared for in the slightest. Duchess Zalitha says before the door to the sitting room is suddenly opened, and in rushes a serving woman in a stern uniform. She holds out a data slate for Duchess Zalitha to take and quickly read off. Of course, she gives Hart Garan a glance with a raised eyebrow. Of course, well played. Anything happening outside this room is outside my power and plausibly deniable. Hart Garan states, and she smiles. Stating you have plausible deniability is as good as a confession. Is there a reason I received no warning? Would you care to potentially spoil the plans of the Empress? Only with the utmost caution, and consider the position of my own house. I see. Still, I must be off. Dardalam, bring one of my daughters here. Tell her to be on her best behavior. I have to speak to a few people, Duchess Zalitha states. Will she be able to make the appropriate arrangements and deals? My daughters speak with my voice for all but the final signature on documents. Duchess Zalitha remarks, Now if you'll excuse me, the Queen Amaral calls. By all means, I would hate to interfere with your duties and obligations, Hart Garan says with a smile. Thank you. Now if you'll pardon me for being an inattentive host, she says before flowing out of the room before he can answer. A combination of a snub and an assertion of his status as a guest and not master of this house. He turns to regard the large crystal window that overlooks the city below. Imported and contained water is used to keep several luscious rows of flowers and shrubbery alive to serve as a symbol of power. The forest pulls back. For all that it unifies with people, it rarely does so for long. It is connected to and of all beings bound to it. But it seems discomforted by the prospects of mortality. Eventually, the natural gurgles and burbles of a living being will cause it to back off and get some distance. They have yet to make a full awakening. They're trying to make things a little less miraculous, figure out a way for this to work, for it to be reliable. The first time was a miracle. The second is going to be deliberate. The third is going to be simple. At least that's the plan. So far, they've gotten a temporary connection to some local plants that are currently transmuting base dust into water to drink. The lush forest. Should we succeed here, it will not be a dark forest, for their branches will not block out the sky and devour fire, nor will it be a glowing bright forest in a massive rainfall. It will be a lush forest in a land of dryness and absence. Morgarquin states out loud. There is approval from the other side. Last time I spilled my blood, and so did many other sorcerers. I'm willing to bleed again, but let us see how simple this. He cuts himself off and fades out of view as an air car coming in low, and quiet passes over a transformed patch of scrub bush. One that had been only converting dust near the roots and looked unchanged. The air car glides overhead and then starts swooping around the area, clearly looking for him, so he waits until it nearly passes over him and hops up to grip the underside. A bit of clambering, and he has his ear to the window. There is then a clink as the woman senses him, and a laser pistol is held right against the window, even as the air car suddenly stops. His grip is good, though, and he stays on. Who are you? She demands, and then her eyes widen as he slowly fades into view. City Shaker? Dumb nickname. I broke exactly what I wanted to, and nothing more, Morgarquin says before clambering up onto the roof and sitting down cross-legged. Let her make what she will of that. She came to him, recognizes him on sight and therefore likely wants something from him. After a few moments, she sticks her head out and gives him an odd look. "What are you doing?" "What are you doing?" he asks her, and her eyes narrow. "I'm not the maniac on top of someone's roof. And I'm not the crazy woman clearly looking for the maniac," he replies just as quickly. Her eyes don't narrow further, but they do harden. "What do you want? Do you think that sorcerers aren't tracked? That they don't raise eyebrows when they go onto our worlds? You people carry grudges and some go generational. Damn, Brinchar, you've given us a worse reputation than before," Morgarkon says before scooting back and opening the door opposite of her to slip into the air car. "So once again, what do you want?" "We just want to know what you're up to. A personal project. If no one does anything stupid, then no one gets hurt." "Do you have any idea how chilling that is?" "Yes, but what business is it of the local ladies and lords? I've checked. I'm not on anyone's personal land. Queen Margot might have some right to tell me what to." Morgarkon begins before she pulls at her jacket and reveals an electrum-plated badge of Queen Margot. "Sorcerer, I know you can kill me, but I have my duties to my queen. What are you doing here?" "A few months back myself and my fellows pulled off a miracle. One that was hidden because shortly after we uncovered a darkness so black and widespread that an entire world is in a hidden lockdown. Long story short, there is a second dark forest. I'm here to see if we can make a third." "What?" "There is a second dark forest. It's on Lilb Tulelb. We call it the Bright Forest. And if I succeed here, there will be a lush forest as well." "A lush forest? This..." Her grip on the controls tightens. "I am taking you to my lady. You will explain to her why and how you intend to plant a deadly and powerful entity on her lands." "And if I refuse?" Morgarkon asks, and she freezes with a spike of terror piercing her axiomora. "Calm down, it was just me giving your tail a yank. I'll go with you." "Thank you," she says as he settles into his seat and gets comfortable. "How did you know I was coming?" "I have been trying to make a new forest here. So far, all I've done is make a short-lived extension of the dark forest and, oh, that might work." Morgarkon begins to explain before the obvious answer hits him like a mallet. He reaches for the car door and then pauses, looks to the representative of Queen Margot, and then shrugs before sitting back into his seat. "I was born and raised among the small or lesser folk. I don't want my actions to suddenly slam down on you because Queen Temper Tantrum can't control herself. My lady is not like that. Maybe not, but the moments that define me are in two parts. Some rich bitch screwing over me and everyone I love so she can have a few more tritite to weigh her overfull pockets, and the Empress deciding to only do something after it became her problem, despite it being her job to stop that kind of nonsense. I wasn't driven from my home in a night of blood and horror. I left after sneaking out of bed and hearing my parents lament over the unending horrors being pushed down on them. When I heard that my enemies were using me as a particularly sharp knife with which to bleed my family. I wrote out a goodbye and left." She just stares at him. "All of that is a long way of saying that I have no desire to have my actions set off a noble or rich bitch to start trampling others underfoot, even if they unlikely to do such or the person in question are their bootlicks. Now let's go. Let's see what Miss Queen has to say." "Why are you so—" "I'm not married," he says simply, and she pauses. "I'm not hitting on you, I'm explaining. Sorcerers get brought into big, wealthy, and privileged families. We're hot commodities. But I'm not married. My memories of my low birth haven't been drowned in wine and caviar. And it's why I refuse to be married. I never want to lose that, to forget myself. I would think it's more complicated than that. It is, but at the same time, it's not. Complicated things are made up of lots of simple things and are often pulled apart by just a few simple actions." Morgarkon answers, and she thinks. "I suppose, do you think this will be a small thing that breaks apart a bigger thing? We will have to wait and see, won't we?"